PHI 204, Study Session 2, The Problem of Faith and Reason. Introduction. In this study session, you shall learn about the debate on faith and reason, which is one of the prime problems that Christian scholars had to grapple with. Beyond the concerns of the early church, this continued to be an issue of serious debate, especially in the medieval era, and continued to be a topic of serious debate in the contemporary era, especially among philosophers of religion. On the part of the Greeks, there was no problem, only one principle: philosophical reasoning guided their thinking. Having no divine revelation in the form of sacred scriptures, most of their religious notions were transmitted through their poets and traditions. However, the importance of these religious notions were either rejected or downplayed by philosophers of the time. What little they retained from popular religion, they made to conform to the dictates of their philosophical systems. In the same vein, the Jews had no problem with distinguishing between faith and reason. They avoided the problem by adhering to only one side of the dichotomy, which in their case was faith. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to state two sources of information open to the Christian thinkers which led to the problem of faith and reason. State the name of the three Christian thinkers who commented on the problem of faith and reason. Describe how Justin Martyr envisaged harmony between Christianity and Greek philosophy. Describe how Clement of Alexandria sees philosophy. And lastly, state why Tertullian holds that Christians should disregard philosophical speculations. Faith versus reason, a controversy between philosophers and Christian thinkers. Greatly influenced by the Greek thought system, Christian thinkers found themselves having to answer attacks from philosophers to satisfy the Greek thirst for a systematic worldview. They were therefore presented with two sources of information: revelation and philosophical reason. This gave rise to several questions. Is Christian belief rational? What is the relationship between faith and reason? Can one coherently embrace both routes to the truth? Should faith and reason lead to conflicting conclusions? How will the quarrel between them be resolved? Why should a person of faith dabble in the speculations of pagan philosophers? In this world, people hold different beliefs about various issues of interest. How will the quarrel between them be resolved? Why should a person of faith dabble in the speculations of pagan philosophers? Due to the fact that philosophical tradition provided mixed data, the problem intensified. For Christians, so much in Greek philosophy was repugnant. Irrespective of their different conceptions of the nature of deity, other problems still lingered on. Plato believed in the individual fulfillment, though the exercise of one's autonomous reasoning rather than relating to a divine creator. Plato also believed in reincarnation, a doctrine that is incompatible with the biblical account of the afterlife. On the part of Aristotle, no room is given to individual immortality. The Epicureans, on their part, held that the pursuit of pleasure rather than obedience to God was the prime goal of life. Epicureans believed that at death the soul disintegrates with the body, hence no afterlife. Despite these philosophies, Christians found much admiration in Greek philosophy. Helpfully, Aristotle provided arguments for the existence of God with the stress that everything in life has a teleological dimension. Seeing the order, harmony, benevolence, and beauty composed in the cosmos, the Stoics claimed that the order must be directed towards the fulfillment of a divine purpose. Thus, they held that adjusting one's life to the will of God was the key to the good life. In the same vein, there were mixed data provided by the biblical tradition. On the negative side, Paul's first letter to the Corinthians proclaimed that the wisdom of the world is foolishness in the eyes of God, and that the gospel of Christ appeared preposterous to the pagan world. In other words, make sure no one traps you and deprives you of your freedom by some second-hand, empty, rational philosophy based on the principles of this world instead of Christ. Irrespective of these views, the biblical tradition provided a number of bridges to Greek thoughts. In Paul's discourse with a group of Epicureans and Stoics, he was of the view that he was providing useful knowledge of the same God that they were already worshipping. He even went as far as quoting Stoic writers in support of his theological position. Paul believed that, although the Greeks lacked biblical revelation, they do have some knowledge of God and the moral law. It is of note to highlight that even the book of Proverbs reflects praises to wisdom in a way that Socrates would approve. The prologue of the Gospel of John speaks of the divine logos, thereby providing a conceptual link with Heraclitus and the Stoics. Given this mixed data, the future of Greek philosophy within the Christian tradition hung on whether or not the differences or the similarities between the two systems would be emphasized. The possibility of harmonizing Greek philosophy within the Christian tradition. So much has been said on the dissimilarities and similarities between Greek philosophy and Christian tradition. But in this aspect of our study, we want to look at the views of some scholars who have made useful contributions to this issue under consideration here. The three Christian thinkers are Justin Martyr, Clement, and Tertullian. But how exactly did they address it? Justin Martyr, born in Samaria at about AD 100 to pagan parents. Justin, a passionate intellectual, journeyed throughout the Middle East and Italy searching for knowledge. Enthusiastically, he studied Stoicism, Aristotelianism, and Pythagoreanism in turn, but was not fascinated by the teachings of these philosophical persuasions. At last, he was attracted to Platoism, which made a lifelong impact on him. His encounter with philosophy gave him the opportunity to discover that not even Platonic philosophy, the spiritual high point of Greek thought, fell short of what the gospel of Christ had to offer. Impressed by the consistency and courage of Christians at the face of death, he became a convert and an articulate defender of the new religion. With his associates, Justin suffered martyrdom around AD 165. Justin was optimistic about the harmony between Christianity and Greek philosophy by claiming that the truly holy men are those who bestow attention to philosophy. To the critics of the Christianity faith, he asserts that the Christian gospel and the best in pagan philosophy do not compete but point to the same truth. Justin illustrates his claim by pointing out that Plato and the scriptures agree that our souls have special affinity to God, that we are morally responsible for our actions, and that it is time of reckoning in the world to come. Furthermore, Justin claims that the good in Plato's Republic is clearly the same as the God of the Bible. Relying on historical information, Justin assumes that Socrates and Plato had so much of the truth because they were acquainted with the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. But in addition to this, John's Gospel tells us that the Logos, that is Christ, gives light to all humankind. According to Justin, both the Greeks and non-Greeks were able to discover fragments of God's truth apart from the Bible, because they possess seeds of the divine reason, that is the spermatic Logos. He holds that Socrates and Plato, along with Abraham, were Christians before Christ, because they followed the divine reason within them. Hence, both Greek philosophy and the Old Testament were preparatory phases that found their culmination in Christianity. Educated individuals need not choose between Christianity and their intellectual heritage, since all truth is revealed by God, be it from the mouth of the prophets or implanted in pagan philosophy by the divine Logos. Clement of Alexandria. Clement was born of pagan parents around AD 150. He became a Christian through the influence of his teacher, Pantaenus, a converted Stoic. In his approach to Greek philosophy, Clement was familiar with the ancient texts in the history of philosophy, which he frequently quoted in support of his positions. In his work, De Stromata, he makes an impassioned argument for Christians to respect the treasures of Greek thought. Quoting Psalms 29 verse 3, "The Lord is on many waters," Clement speculates that this includes the waters of Greek philosophy and not just those of the biblical tradition. In support of his position, he holds that all truth is one and all wisdom is from the Lord. Should we find words of wisdom in Plato, then it is from God, no less than the words of the prophets. Hence, fragments of God's internal truth have found their way even into pagan philosophy. For Clement, it is foolish for Christians to reinvent the wheel. If Plato had good arguments for the immortality of the soul, then we can use his work and don't need to duplicate his efforts. He sees philosophy as a gift of divine providence and compares the Old Testament law with philosophy. The first was given to the Jews and the second to the Greeks, and God used both sources of wisdom to prepare hearts and minds for receiving the message of Jesus. According to Clement, can be a helpful tool for understating scripture. Philosophy teaches us the skill of logic, the value of clear definitions, the analysis of language, and the ability to formulate demonstrations, all of which will lead us to truth. To diminish this impact of Paul's warning against empty rational philosophy, Clement emphasizes Paul's qualification that he is referring to philosophies that are based on the principles of this world instead of Christ. Hence, he concludes that what is not branding all philosophy as alien to Christianity, but only those schools such as Epicureanism that abolished providence and defied pleasures. Despite his claim that Greek philosophy is a kind of divine revelation, Clement does not fail to highlight its negative precepts. In line with the view of many Christian writers, he believed the Greeks stole many ethical and theological ideas from the Hebrews. He also held that Greek philosophy gives us only fragmentary and partial truth, while Revelation gives us the fuller picture. Therefore, too much attention to philosophy can entangle us in unnecessary quarrels. He pointed out, however, that philosophy pursued for its own sake can be enjoyable and profitable for the Christian. He maintained that philosophy is not the product of vice, since philosophy makes men virtuous. It follows then that it is the work of God, whose work it is solely to do good, and all things given by God are given and received well. Tertullian, born around AD 160 to pagan parents in North African city of Carthage, Tertullian was converted to Christianity in 193. After being impressed by the courage of Christians who were being put to death for their faith, Tertullian had a successful law career in Rome, and his polemical courtroom style reflects throughout all his writings. A historian has described him as vigorous and incisive in argument, delighting in logical tricks and with an advocate's love of a clever sophistry, a powerful writer of splendid torrential prose. Whereas Justin and Clement delight in the Christian truth they find in the Greeks, Tertullian only grudgingly admits that sometimes philosophers found the truth. He is of the view that although philosophers agree with the Christians that the Logos, the divine word and reason, created the universe, they become inflated with pride in their own reason. Their truths are not the result of spiritual insight, but rather of dumb luck. Much like a sailor happening to find his way in a storm, according to him. We shall not deny that philosophers have sometimes thought the same things as ourselves. It sometimes happens even in a storm, when the boundaries of sky and sea are lost in confusion, that some harbor is stumbled on by the laboring ship, by some happy chance. On the whole, however, Tertullian has little use of philosophy. Christ tells us, "Seek and you'll find." However, Rather than this sanctioning the sort of seeking that characterizes philosophy, Tertullian strongly believes that Christians should disregard philosophical speculations, since heresies arise from philosophy. Tertullian describes the Apostle Paul's meeting with philosophers in Athens as an encounter with huckstering wiseacre. He also ridiculed the revered figure of Socrates and the philosopher's famous deathbed scene. Finally, Tertullian's most famous dismissal of the link between philosophy and Christianity is reflected in his claim that the Christian faith desired no further belief, for this is our victorious faith, that there is nothing which we ought to believe. Besides, he maintains that just as Athens, the intellectual center of philosophy, and Jerusalem, the spiritual home of Christianity, are separated by hundreds of miles geographically, so pagan philosophy and Christian gospel are miles apart spiritually and can never meet. Nothing is known of Tertullian after the death of his last literary work in the year 220. However, he has made his place in history as the most forceful religious veto to the project of reconciling faith and philosophy. On a charitable note, we can understand his concerns with the way that alien philosophical ideologies were muddying the waters of Christian theology. Notwithstanding, his attempts in separating the philosophical and biblical traditions failed. The importance of the writings of Justin and Clement in arguing for the importance of Greek philosophy for Christian thoughts cannot be underestimated. Certainly, if the medieval thinkers had not seen the value of preserving the Greek philosophical tradition, the shape of the Western Christianity and intellectual history would have been different. Study session summary. In this study session, you have learned that the first centuries of Christianity, Christian thinkers were at the defense of their faith from philosophical attacks. 2. The sole obsession of first centuries of Christianity, Christian thinkers was protecting the Christian doctrines against heresies. 3. With the deepening of Christian thought into culture, the task of working out a Christian philosophical worldview inevitably became the next task in the development of Christian thoughts. 4. The thoughts of such Christian thinkers as Justin Martyr, Clement of Alexandria, and Tertullian contributed to the rise of Christian philosophy. End of study session 2. Thank you for listening.